Hi everyone, I'm Claire Saffitz. Welcome to my home kitchen. Today I'm showing you a dessert that is beloved the world around. It is the Pavlova. The origins are kind of disputed. Some say it's Australian, some say it's from New Zealand. It has this meringue base and this passion fruit topping. So it's a meringue dessert and a fruit dessert, which means it's kind of one of my favorites. Total crowd pleaser and really perfect for the holidays. I've made so many Pavlova before because it is kind of a recipe, but it's also kind of like a category of dish in a way. The classic is passion fruit, and I want to give a shout out to my friend Emily, who came to visit for a weekend and brought me a shipment of the most incredible passion fruit. And we have just been enjoying them, like eating them plain with a little sugar stirred into the pulp. Just so good. So I feel like I had to make Pavlova because I have passion fruit. So I'm making the classic, but it is really a kind of fruit dessert where it's like you could do any fruit topping. I do think that passion fruit is the best. It comes together pretty easily, not that many ingredients. The main thing to think about is that the meringue has to bake for a couple hours to really dry out, but that's really it. Starting with the meringue, we have egg whites, granulated sugar, powdered sugar, a little salt, some vanilla extract, and a little cream of tartar. For the whipped cream, I have just heavy cream and a little crème fraîche. That adds some density. Then for the passion fruit topping, I have fresh passion fruit and a little agave to sweeten it. I have an all-purpose meringue in What's for Dessert, and that's basically what I'm making and showing you. I am making it in a stand mixer because it's just so much more hands-off and faster, but the instructions in the book are with a hand mixer. So I'm using a stand mixer. Whatever kind of mixer you have is what you can use. I also decided that I was going to bake the meringue in a springform pan. It makes it really cake-like, and to me feels like a little bit more kind of celebration focused. The kind of meringue that I'm making today for Pavlova is a kind of marshmallowy meringue. The meringue bakes at a super low temp. It doesn't even really bake, it more kind of dehydrates. And what happens is you get this really crispy, light, dissolve in your mouth shell around the outside, and the center is soft like a marshmallow. For that style of meringue, I have a very specific proportion of sugar that I'm mixing into the egg whites. And I'm using a combination of granulated sugar and confectioner's sugar, and that's really important. That tends to make a super stable, like really dense, really voluminous meringue. I guess dense and voluminous are kind of opposing ideas, but it's both somehow. I'm going to start with my egg whites in my mixer. I washed the mixer bowl earlier today. I made sure it was really clean. What you don't want is any like residue of butter or any fat in the bowl. The egg whites are room temp. It's not like make or break, but they will whip a lot more easily if they're room temp. So to that, I'm going to add a little bit of salt. Salt helps the egg whites to whip up. So about a half teaspoon of salt. I'm going to add about a quarter teaspoon of cream of tartar. Cream of tartar is a form of acid. You can use like a half teaspoon of lemon juice or vinegar. That will be fine. But the acid is sort of stabilizing for the egg whites. The sugar dissolves into the egg whites and the whole thing whips into a foam. And you get like all these like millions of little air bubbles. And what we want to do is help the egg whites to like hold onto that air. So these are all kind of stabilizing ingredients. I'm going to turn the mixer on medium-low. And at first I just want the beater attachment to break up the egg whites. When you crack an egg, you'll notice like the egg white kind of holds together, and then you'll have some kind of more watery parts of the egg white. So I just want to break everything up to get it more liquid. The egg whites are not only broken up, but they're starting to get really like foamy and opaque and white and gaining in volume. So that's when we want to start adding the granulated sugar. The granulated sugar goes in first. This is a cup. I'm going to sprinkle it in and just let it kind of slowly cascade into the bowl. And that's because egg whites are mostly water, and whipping the sugar slowly into the egg whites will dissolve the sugar. That's what you want. And I'm whipping on medium because a slightly slower mix is better for meringue, partly because it gives the sugar a little bit more time to dissolve, and partly because it just helps to make it more stable. That's actually technically on medium now. Okay. I just added all the sugar. The mixer is still on medium. And I basically want to let this continue to whip. I can increase the speed a little bit to help it along. But this is going to whip up into a super glossy, like really voluminous meringue. The egg whites started off really at the sort of bottom. They barely even came up to the bottom of the whisk in the mixing bowl. They're now halfway up the whisk. And by the time the meringue is done, it's gonna be, at least 3/4 of the way covering the whisk. So that's how much it gains in volume. No kidding. No. Good listening. Sort of. Okay, so the meringue, I can see it's getting even bigger. It's starting to be pretty glossy, and it's starting to also really sharply hold the marks from the whisk as it goes through. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and show you what the texture looks like. This is a firm peak. So see those little like pointy pieces of meringue off the top of the whisk? We're at firm peaks. So adding confectioner sugar at this stage further stabilizes it, and because it's so finely ground, it dissolves really quickly, so we can add it at this later stage. So I have a sieve just because sometimes confectioner sugar is very lumpy. And I'm gonna just sift this over the meringue. So the whisk goes back on, and at first I'm gonna put the mixer on the lowest setting just to incorporate, you don't want like the sugar to fly everywhere. It actually thins out the texture of the meringue, so it'll become a little bit looser and you lose that stiff peak. So now what I wanna do is increase this speed, and I'm gonna beat it again until I get back to that firm peak. And that's gonna give me like the shiniest, densest, but most voluminous meringue. So medium high. All right, let's give it a test. It's looking so good. I think we're back at a firm peak. Yep, looks so good. It's like a bird's beak. It's like standing straight up. So now I'm gonna add just a teaspoon of vanilla extract. Meringue doesn't really have any flavor. It's just all texture. And I love it, but like a little vanilla goes a long way. So I'm just gonna beat that in briefly.
Could you put the paste in?
You could put paste, for sure. Now I'm gonna get this out of the bowl and into my pan. Oh, it looks so good. So I'm baking it in the springform pan, and I prepared my pan already. So I have a round of parchment paper on the bottom and some strips all the way around the sides. I greased the pan with a little bit of oil. I just rubbed it across the surfaces with my hand. And I did that so that the parchment sticks to the pan, but I didn't grease the parchment. It doesn't need any grease. In fact, you don't want grease because one thing that destabilizes meringue is fat, so you don't really want it to come into contact with that. The other thing that destabilizes meringue is time. So, if you had to like leave and go make a phone call or something and come back in 5 minutes, that's okay, but you just don't really want to like let it sit here. One thing I want to try to avoid, because I have this like super light meringue that really holds its shape, it's really easy to create air pockets. I want to try to eliminate any big air pockets in here. So I'm going to just dollop in the meringue, and it's focusing kind of on the center of the pan. So you can see how nice and stiff it is. It's just incredible. It's like a miracle. So that's 2/3 of the mixture. And now what I want to do is just kind of slowly work it to the sides of the pan. This is, again, is just for eliminating big air pockets. But like, look at how beautiful it looks. I love it. So I'm just spreading this around, making sure that it's covering everywhere. And now I'm going to scrape the rest on top. Oh my gosh, it looks so good. I love it. It's just like fun to play with, actually. So now that I have everything in the pan, now is like the really fun part, because I'm going to create lots of big divots and swooshes and swirls throughout the meringue. What I want to do is create pockets where the cream can kind of fill in, and the meringue's thinner in some parts and thicker in some parts. That's how I really get a lot of textural variation as it bakes. In the pan, it's covered like on most of its sides except for the surface. So it does bake for quite a long time because you need the meringue to really dry out. So I have my oven preheated to 200. That's important. 200 super low. So I'm just taking the spoon. I have a big spoon here, and I'm just making like little craters in the surface all over. And one thing about meringue, because there's all that air in there, when it goes into a warm oven, all those like millions of little air bubbles expand slightly. So the whole thing will puff up. But what also happens is it loses some of the definition that you see like in its raw state. So just know that. So sometimes I will say like make the divots deeper than you think they need to be, because you will lose some of that over time. So this is going to go into my oven. Again, I'm at 200. The meringue doesn't so much bake as it does just like dries out. And I'll show you how to test for when it's done, but it will take upwards of 2 hours, especially in the pan. I would say more like 2 to 2.5. I baked mine really late last night and I pulled it out. I probably could have gone a little longer. I pulled it out at like 2 hours, 15 minutes. Passion fruit have incredible acidity, but also so much complexity and flavor, and like so tropical and perfumed. They're incredible. They are kind of purplish brownish, and a sign of ripeness is that they're super wrinkled. So these have been sitting on the counter for half a week, and they just keep getting more and more wrinkled day by day. So I'm definitely ready to cut them open. Inside is this kind of very loose web of seeds and pulp. The passion fruit seeds are incredible. They pop when you chew them. It's like really satisfying to eat. It's really hard to find passion fruit in New York, but if you live in Southern California or a tropical or subtropical climate, maybe it's less of a special thing, but to me this is just like the ultimate luxury. So I'm going to basically just scoop out the seeds and pulp into a bowl. Any fruit is really great on pavlova. Macerated berries, strawberries, blackberries. You could do a blueberry pavlova. Mango would be really, really good. Maybe like give it a quick saute, because this is kind of the season for more tropical things. If it was like cooked just a little bit, you could do like an incredible pineapple version. So sometimes what happens is you get some little bits of stringiness that are kind of holding the seeds together. I take these out. Then I'm going to sweeten it with a little bit of agave. So it's just going to kind of take the edge off of the passion fruit, which are super sour, but everything else is going to be pretty sweet. So I want to just very lightly sweeten it. So I have about, I would say 3/4 of a cup here. I'm going to start with maybe about a tablespoon of agave, but this part is largely to taste. And I still want it to be tart. I really still want that sourness. That's what's great about passion fruit. I like agave because it's a liquid sweetener. It doesn't really need to dissolve. It just incorporates super easily. I'm gonna give it a little taste. I think that's good. In too large quantities, sugar dulls flavor and you don't even know what you're eating. But in small quantities, it is such an effective flavor enhancer. It's like this now tastes more passion fruity. It doesn't taste noticeably sweet. It just kind of takes that sour edge off and makes it really shine. It's like super bright. This is actually going to go in the fridge, and it can just hang out until my meringue is done. So my timer says that this meringue has been in for 2 hours and 17 minutes. I'm going to go ahead and check it. So I know that it's done because it's matte all over, and when I press in some of the valleys of the meringue, I feel like a certain thickness of shell, and then underneath is kind of soft, bouncy material. So that's how you know it's done. Another test is that if you try to sort of pull away a little bit of parchment, it should release. This is just going to cool now. And because it didn't bake that hot, it doesn't take that long to cool. So I have all of my components for pavlova. Well, almost. I have my topping, my meringue, which looks so beautiful on this plate. I'm now like very into the kind of making it in a mold. And the last thing is to whip my cream. So you can just go straight whipped cream. But the meringue is already so light, and then you add this light whipped cream to it, that I actually like a little added density to the cream. So I'm going to add some crème fraîche. It also adds a little bit of tang, which goes well with the passion fruit. And furthermore, it makes it a little, not like it makes it savory, but it just makes it decidedly unsweet, which is a nice foil against the meringue, which has a ton of sugar. So I'm going to do about a cup, maybe more like 3/4 of a cup of heavy cream, just kind of eyeballing it. And about a half a cup of crème fraîche. If you don't have crème fraîche, you can use sour cream. That works really well too. I actually love the mixture. I love like a little sour cream and whipped cream. It's so good. Oops. Just a dash of vanilla. Maybe not even a teaspoon, maybe a half teaspoon. So obviously I used the stand mixer for whipping the meringue. I could use it again to whip the cream, but the bowl is dirty and I don't feel like washing it, and I already put the mixer away. So I'm just going to do this by hand. Anytime you have under like 2 cups of cream, it's doable by hand. Make sure you have a nice large bowl. So I'm just going to keep whipping this, and eventually it will start to thicken, and I want to go until I have kind of soft peaks. I'm not going to whip it to like a super firm cream. Adding the crème fraîche, it makes like you're adding additional fat, so it's making the cream whip faster, and it's also then stabilizing it once it's already whipped. So when you whip to soft peaks with a little bit of crème fraîche, it'll kind of set at that texture, and it like won't fall or deflate or kind of like run like sometimes just straight whipped cream does. Make sure you have a nice wide bowl, because sometimes it has a tendency to splatter before it really starts to thicken. So this is basically softly whipped. The cream holds its shape in like a little mound, but it doesn't hold a peak. Quick note, you really want to do this only before serving, because there's all this liquid in the cream, and when it hits that meringue, which has all that sugar in it, it's going to kind of start to dissolve it. I'm not saying you couldn't do this like if you were having dinner before you sat down to dinner, and then, 30 minutes later you're serving dessert. You just don't want to do it like hours ahead. Although there is something great that you get in that kind of dissolving texture, which is why Eat and Mess is so good. With that same spoon as before, just kind of spreading it around. So now I'm going to top it. And again, this especially you want to do right before serving. So I'm just gonna go a couple spoonfuls all over. Okay, this looks so great. I'm so excited to eat it. I think the whole thing looks so beautiful. I'm really happy with how it turned out. I like how it kind of looks like a cake. Slicing it is gonna be a little difficult just because that meringue just kind of breaks and like falls apart wherever it wants to. So I'm gonna give it a try. I think using a serrated knife is probably gonna help me the most. Keep in mind, I still have that parchment under there because that thing was just never coming loose. So keep that in mind when you're serving. The whole thing is so soft. Worked better than I thought it would. A little extra on top. Frankly, this meringue could have cooked more. It's a little wet in the center, but still pretty nice and marshmallowy all the way through. It's really just like from there over. And of course, crispy on the outside, which is what you want. The pop from the passion fruit seeds against everything. It's so good. You get like an actual crunch in there in a dessert that otherwise can be pretty soft. I really like the crème fraîche. It gives it a richness that I think it wouldn't have otherwise, because like there's not really fat in here otherwise. You just have egg whites and sugar and then your fruit. So like that really rich, kind of dense, thick cream is so good. I feel like this is really show-stopping. Perfect for a New Year's celebration or any kind of like wintertime treat. You could really make it with any kind of fruit that you like. And I think it's like relatively low effort. Obviously it spends a couple hours in the oven, but other than that, not so complicated to put together and not a long ingredient list. I'm so happy I made it. And thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And Happy New Year.